Coming up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea forecast to see another day with more than 100,000 new cases of COVID-19 as Omicron continues to spread exponentially across the country. We have all the latest developments in regards to the coronavirus situation in South Korea. A step closer to war, Russian President Vladimir Putin raises the stakes in the Ukraine crisis by officially recognizing two separatist regions in the east of that country. In response, the US and Europe prepare sanctions banning investment, trade and financing in the breakaway regions. Plus, South Korea's Nat'l Assembly approves an extra budget bill worth some $14.2 billion. The funds will go to small business owners hit by COVID restrictions, lawmakers reaching a last-minute deal to up the amount by roughly $2.4 billion from the initial proposal.
Hello and welcome to this Tuesday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. February 22nd here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Mo-kyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Over the course of the next hour or so, we will be taking a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world. We start, though, with the COVID-19 situation. South Korea expecting to see cases, new ones, hover around the 100,000 mark on this Tuesday as the country heads towards what experts are saying will be the peak of the Omicron wave, which is forecast for later this month or even early March.
Authorities, however, have assured that the current situation is still manageable as Omicron does not pose a serious threat to people's health. For more on this, our reporter Choi Min-jung is here in the studio with us. Good morning, Min-jung.
Good morning.
So let's start with the local front. How many cases are we expecting today?
Well, again, we're expecting to see around 100,000 cases for today. From midnight to 9 p.m. on Monday, South Korea saw close to 98,000 cases. This is up by more than 4,600 cases from the day before and also a 1.7-fold increase on week. Authorities revealed that 98.9% of infections confirmed last week were the Omicron strain. And in Jeju Island, the variant accounted for 100% of last week's infections. Health authorities made a forecast on Monday based on studies conducted by 10 domestic and foreign institutes that the Omicron wave will hit its peak in late February or early March. And they expect the country to see around 140,000 to 270,000 daily cases.
OK, so experts are forecasting the daily caseload to basically double in the coming weeks. However, officials and healthcare-related officials insist they aren't overly concerned about this.
Right, Mark. Authorities are cautiously seeing the current situation as an early transition phase of the virus becoming endemic. We've been seeing around 100,000 daily cases in the past couple of days, but the government says that there's no need to be overly concerned. Authorities revealed on Monday that the fatality rate of Omicron is around 0.13%, which is a manageable figure. Although it's twice as dangerous as the seasonal flu, it's also a much lower figure than 0.7% for the Delta variant. However, authorities also stress that the fatality rate could be lower than the seasonal flu among those who've gotten their booster shots. And data also shown that the fatality rate for Omicron for people under 50 is 0%. As of now, many experts are predicting the pandemic will become endemic, but they're still very cautious as to making any call on when exactly this will happen. KDCA Chief Chung Eun-kyung hinted that this outcome is possible if enough immunity is formed in the population and the medical system remains under control without the introduction of a new deadly variant.
But Min-jung, we hear that the Education Ministry is still concerned about the current situation, and this prompted them to change their return to school measures.
Right, Mo-kyan, with fears over Omicron, the education authorities have said that schools can freely implement online classes or adjust school hours during the first 2 weeks of the spring semester. This means if the virus situation worsens, all classes can be switched to 100% online. Initially, the Education Ministry decided to have students return return to classrooms in the upcoming semester despite the current surge. And schools were advised to switch to online classes if 3% of all students at a school were infected or 15% of all students in a single grade were absent due to infection or self-isolation. But now this new guideline has been scrapped for the first 2 weeks due to the increasing number of students coming down with the virus. Confirmed cases among teenagers under 19 years old doubled last week compared to the week before, with more than 153,000 cases.
Right. Fortunately, the fatality rate for people under 50 in South Korea is still 0%, but we still don't want to see students becoming sick. Now, Novavax's vaccine was the 5th shot to be approved for use here in South Korea. It was hoped that this would encourage more unvaccinated people to get vaccinated, and it seems to be the case.
Right, Mark. The number of people getting first shots increased by almost 20,000 on week after inoculations for Novavax's vaccine began in February 14th. More than 43,000 people were vaccinated with first shots during that week, which is up by around 19,000 from the week before. Around 63% of them received the Novavax vaccine. And the vaccine is being met with less reluctance from people as it was developed using a more traditional method than used to make existing vaccines. There were also positive outcomes regarding Pfizer's oral drug. A survey conducted on around 300 Paxlovid recipients showed that the drug was useful in treating respiratory symptoms and sore throats, according to 81% of the respondents. And the majority said they began to recover within 3 days of being treated. Data also showed that none of the people who took the complete 5-day course of the drug became severely ill or died.
All right, Min-jung, thank you so much for your report. Talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, for your reporting, Min-jung. Moving on, in another bid to help small businesses here in South Korea that have been absolutely devastated financially as a result of the protracted COVID-19 restrictions. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle on Tuesday gave the green light to a multi-billion-dollar extra budget bill.
The relief funds will start to be distributed from as early as next week. Our Lee Kyung-in reports.
South Korea's National Assembly on Monday passed an extra budget bill worth some $14.2 billion aimed at compensating small business owners hit by COVID-19 restrictions. This comes as the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party reached a last-minute agreement to increase the budget by roughly $2.4 billion from what the government had initially proposed. With that, some 3.3 million businesses will get 3 million won each, about $2,500. The money will start being rolled out on Wednesday. A list of new recipients are added too. Tutors, golf caddies, and performing artists, as well as other freelance workers in the so-called special employment sector, will each get up to 1 million won or roughly $800 in emergency employment assistance. Private taxi drivers and bus drivers will get 1.5 million won or roughly $1,300 each. The money will be rolled out to recipients starting next month. Lastly, business owners who've seen a drop in sales could get compensation for up to 90% of the losses instead of the previous 80% proposed by the government. And the minimum amount they could get has been raised from 100,000 to 500,000 won or $420. However, the retroactive compensation, the money covering losses that occurred since the start of the pandemic, will not be covered by the new law. That, according to the DP and PPP, will likely be passed next month following more discussions. The tourism and performance sectors are likely to be covered. The passage comes just a little over 2 weeks until the country's presidential election, with the bill expected to affect the decisions of nearly 5 million small business owners. Lee Kyung-in, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his defense ministry to dispatch Russian forces to maintain peace in eastern Ukraine's 2 breakaway regions after he said Moscow would recognize their independence.
For more on the escalating crisis in Ukraine, we have our Ji-young on the line for us. Ji-young, fill us in.
Yes, Mogyan. President Putin ordered Russian troops to maintain peace in eastern Ukraine's two breakaway regions. This came after he signed a decree to officially recognize the two rebel-controlled regions of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine as independent entities. He made the announcement during a live televised national address that lasted for almost 1 hour. Take a listen.
In this regard, I consider it necessary to make a long overdue decision to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. I asked the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation to support this decision and then to ratify the Treaty of Friendship and Mutual Assistance with both republics. These two documents will be readied and signed as soon as possible.
His decision paves the way for Moscow to openly send military and weapons to defend Russia-backed rebels against Ukrainian forces and possibly extend to a larger war or invasion of the country.
Now, responding to the decree, the White House says President Biden will sign an executive order to impose sanctions on the separatist regions.
Yes, that's right, Mark. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki noted that an executive order will be signed by Biden that prohibits new investment, trade, and financing by U.S. persons to, from, or in the separatist regions of Ukraine. She also made it clear that these measures are separate from and would be in addition to the swift and severe economic measures that they have been preparing in coordination with allies and partners should Russia further invade Ukraine. The U.S. also plans to cut ties with Russian banks, banning U.S. financial institutions from making transactions for major Russian banks. Britain also vowed to impose sanctions on Russia, calling Putin's announcement as a breach of international law.
It's a violation, a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. It is a repudiation of the Minsk process and the Minsk agreements, and I think it's a very ill omen and a very dark sign. And it certainly does not seem to me that it's certainly an indication, yet another indication, that things are moving in the wrong direction in Ukraine. The UK will continue to do everything we can to stand by the people of Ukraine with a very robust package of sanctions, as you know.
Europe has continuously warned of sanctions from the 27-nation bloc should Russia recognize the separatist regions as independent, as it could break a peace agreement in the region. Prior to the signing of the decree, amid escalating tensions, Ukraine called on the United Nations Security Council member states for an urgent meeting to come up with measures to guarantee the country's security and ease tensions with Russia. This is all I have for now, but I'll bring more updates in our later newscast. Back to you.
Thank you for the updates, Young. Do keep us updated.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. A task force established by the International Atomic Energy Agency was in Japan for a few days last week to review the safety of the planned release of treated water from the tsunami-damaged Fukushima nuclear power station. The Japanese government announced its basic policy last year to gradually discharge this water into the ocean. It requested the IAEA's assistance to ensure it occurs in line with international safety standards and without harming public health or the environment.
But despite that, South Korea, China, some other of Japan's neighbors, and some fishing communities in Japan are strongly protesting Tokyo's plan. For more, we're joined by Professor Ramon Pacheco-Pardo, Professor of International Relations at King's College London. Good morning, Professor.
Hello, good morning.
So the IAEA will publicize in April its view of Japan's plan. So what do you expect them to say?
Well, the IAEA has been saying for years now, really, that the plan to release this treated water is safe, that it doesn't have any environmental impact. So I would assume that they will keep the same line. We have seen that they have already released an extensive, really extensive press release saying that in their view, the plan is sound and that there are no risks for human health. Of course, not everybody agrees with this, but at least this is the official position of the IAEA for now. And I would expect them to confirm this position when they release the full report in a couple of months.
Now, the task force insists that its review will be conducted objectively and based on science. Do you think that will be enough for the international community and the Japanese public as well to really understand what needs to be done here and, more importantly, say, OK, let's go ahead with it?
Well, I think we should make clear that obviously it is Japanese fishermen who are most concerned because it is their livelihoods that are going to be affected by the release. We have also seen some Japanese former prime ministers, for example, led by Koizumi Junichiro, also saying that there is a risk still going on from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. And of course, Korea, China, Alaska as well, other countries also in East Asia. I don't think they will feel that this is something safe to do regardless of what the IAEA says, because obviously we're talking here about a nuclear power plant, and we're talking about treated water in which not all elements will have been eliminated. This is why it is controversial. So I wouldn't expect the reservations that many communities and many countries have to go away, regardless of what the report may say.
Now, Professor, the task force is made up of, independent and highly recognized experts from around the world, including China and South Korea. So how significant is it that experts from China and South Korea have been included in the panel?
I think it is significant because in the beginning it wasn't clear that the IAEA and the Japanese government were going to agree with this. There was this perception by both of them that they had enough expertise, that the IAEA is sufficiently independent to carry on its own study. But of course, there was pressure coming from other countries, Korea and China that you mentioned. There are also European experts, an American expert as well, that saying, well, I mean, we need to check by ourselves because this is going to affect the international community. This is not only about Japanese communities, Korea or China. It is going to affect many other countries as well. So I think it is a political victory for the countries that wanted their independent experts to be part of this task force. And I do think that this will bring more credibility to the process. I don't think the politics will go away, but at the very least, there will be more credibility to the whole process than there would have been otherwise without these experts.
Yeah, I think there would have been a lot of complaining in Seoul and Beijing if South Korean and Chinese experts hadn't been involved, considering they're so close in terms of geographically speaking. The IAEA says it's scientifically and it's a fair technical organization, fully transparent, independent from any external factors. Generally speaking, a lot of international organizations kind of have a bad reputation these days. As far as the IAEA goes, is it generally considered to be the case that the agency is straight down the line?
I think that compared to other organizations, it is more independent. Having said that, no international organization is free from politics. We have seen how the organization has been criticized by Iran, has been not independent, of course, North Korea, but we have also seen sometimes European countries and even the US complained of the organization, arguing that it wasn't being fully transparent, that it was being affected by the decisions being taken by the countries that they were, and the politics in the countries that they were investigating. And I think this is going to be no different. It is a fairly independent organization, but of course there are going to be accusations that it's being affected by the fact that it is in Japan at the invitation of the Japanese government. So it would be very difficult for the IAEA to come up with any statement that is highly critical of the Japanese government or even the Japanese experts working in the Fukushima power plant. But I would say, as I started in the beginning when answering this question, that we can assume that it is more independent than other organizations because this has been the case in the past.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your insights. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
And the four major candidates in the running for South Korea's March 9th presidential election on Monday evening took part in their third televised debate, and the first hosted by the state election watchdog. They traded verbal barbs over each other's economic policies in the post-pandemic era. They also didn't pull any punches when it came to attacking each other over various corruption allegations. Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
During Monday evening's televised debate, South Korea's four major presidential candidates clashed over economic policies in the pandemic era. The government's COVID-19 relief plan was the first topic during the third TV debate among the four candidates and the first hosted by the National Election Commission. Ruling party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung and his main opposition party rival Yoon Suk-yeol agreed that swift compensation is needed for those hit hardest by the pandemic.
The nation should be responsible for what it tossed at the people. I vow full compensation for the losses suffered by micro-business owners, the self-employed and delivery workers.
Because the losses have been inflicted upon the self-employed and micro-business owners by state policies, they need to be swiftly compensated in accordance with the Constitution.
Ahn Cheol-soo of the minor opposition People's Party highlighted the need to ensure fiscal soundness.
Firstly, we need to move away from populist policies like disaster relief for all and focus on those who have suffered damages.
Shim Sang-jung of the minor Progressive Justice Party called for new social rules while criticizing the two major parties for blaming each other.
Just as President Roosevelt overcame the Great Depression, overcoming a disaster requires new social rules.
Lee and Yoon frequently traded verbal barbs during the debate, wrangling over corruption allegations involving their former aides and family members. On the direction of the next government's economic policies, Lee said he will focus on tackling unfairness to drive growth, which was criticized by his opponents for its lack of practicality. Yoon stressed the need to foster a digital database economy, prompting criticism from Ahn, who questioned its validity. Shim vowed to tackle inequality and make a transition to a green economy, while Ahn called for lifting regulations on science and technology and called for more investment in the area. The candidates will take part in two more debates hosted by South Korea's election watchdog, scheduled for Friday and March 2nd, with a focus on politics and social issues respectively. The election takes place on March 9th. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
And South Korea's four main presidential candidates will be back on their campaign trail on Tuesday, following the brief break the previous day due to the televised debate. Lee Jae-myung of the ruling Democratic Party heads to Incheon and Gyeonggi-do province, where he used to serve as governor. Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party will travel the southern coast of Chungcheongnam-do province and before heading to the southwestern province of Jeollabuk-do. Shim Sang-jung of the Justice Party will rally in the central city of Daejeon and the nearby city of Cheonan. Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party heads to the southeastern port city of Busan. The presidential election takes place on March 9th.
South Korea's consumer sentiment has fallen this month, mostly due to the rapid spread of Omicron. According to the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, the composite consumer sentiment index was 103.1 in February, down 1.3 points from the previous month. Despite the downturn, the reading remains over 100, meaning there are still more optimists than pessimists when it comes to the economy. The central bank said the sharp rise in daily COVID-19 infections dented consumer confidence. February is likely to be the 15th month in a row that South Korea's exports have been higher compared to a year earlier. The gains led by semiconductors, cars and petroleum products. But rising oil prices mean South Korea continues to run a trade deficit. Lee Hyun with this report.
South Korea's exports recorded double-digit on-year gains in the first 20 days of February. The Korea Customs Service said on Monday that exports for the first 20 days of the month stood at $34.3 billion, up more than 13% from a year earlier. As there have been fewer working days so far this February compared to the same period last year, the daily average rose by even more, up around 17%. Should the trend continue for the rest of the month, it would make February the 15th straight month of on-year export growth. The growth was led by solid outbound shipments of major export items. Semiconductor exports were up around 18% on-year to record roughly $6.7 billion. Exports of automobiles and petroleum products also jumped almost 11% and 56% respectively. But South Korea's trade deficit soared to over $1.6 billion as of February 20th. That's up $130 million compared to a year earlier. The country's trade deficit has grown since last December as energy prices rose in 2021. That's because the country's imports so far this month went up 12.9% compared to the same period of 2021 to $36 billion. Imported commodities such as petroleum products and coal increased 50% and 130% respectively. But this gap between the country's exports and imports goes beyond energy prices.
Although exports of components usually increase in the months of January and February in South Korea, global demand is falling due to global uncertainties, such as the supply chain issues and the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Because of this, a huge gap remains between the country's exports and imports.
The expert forecasts that the trade deficit will ease slightly as exports are likely to grow over the next several months. Lee Hyun, Arirang News.
Now we cross over to our Oceang for Global Insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's time for Global Insight. COVID-19 has forced us all to work more flexibly and has significantly changed many office spaces and hours as well. In light of such trends, a growing number of countries are experimenting with 4-day work weeks, with Belgium becoming the latest to join the list. The measures are meant to enhance the quality of life, offering a better work-life balance for workers, which is expected to benefit employers too, with increased productivity. To discuss all of these trends and what we can expect from 4-day work weeks, we have joining us today Marga Caproni, partner at Squire Patton Boggs, and Connie Zeng, Associate Professor of Human Resource Management at the University of South Australia, who is also co-director for Centre for Workplace Excellence. Very warm welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us, especially you, Marga. Very late hours in Brussels, and well, let's start with what's going on in Belgium first. Now, your government's decided to implement this 4-day work week in the country. So, please fill us in on how this is going to work.
Yes, so it may be important to emphasize that this is not a right that the employee has, but it is an option that they can request, and the employer has to give his approval. And if that means that if the employee and the employer come to an agreement, they will confirm that agreement in an addendum to the employment contract, it's only valid for 6 months. Then it has to be confirmed that it can be prolonged over time. But it's important to emphasize that the employer has to agree to that 4-day working week. If the employer does not agree, he has to motivate his decision not to award the 4-day work week, but so it's not automatic. And so it will strongly depend on the position of the employee in the company.
Right, and there were other measures too, promoting more flexible working hours and also a much better work-life balance in Belgium, which we're very encouraging to see. And well, Connie, but first, before we get into what 4-day work weeks would look like, how did our societies, most societies today, get used to 5-day work weeks?
I think human beings followed the norm. In the old days, or particularly in the agriculture age, people work seasonably, with half of the year in resting, nesting, or hibernating, and half of the year working and harvesting. But industrial age, starting in the late 18th century or early 19th century, have changed the way people work. Basically, most manufacturing factories work 7 days a week at a time. Not until in 1856, our Melbourne stonemasons started negotiating their working conditions with their employers, and they become the first workers in the world to achieve the 8 hours working day and the 5 days a week. But it took 100 years for the 5 days work to become norm. So I guess, a society just get used to these 5 days work things then.
Hi, Connie, and we are very much used to this 5-day work week. So what do you think explains the shift towards a 4-day work week?
Now, there are a number of reasons for this growing shift to work. I just point out 3 points here. People working too long hours. So across the board, you will see that the many countries actually people work longer hours, and especially in COVID's time, people working from home, and there's a lack of the boundaries between work and life. So the stress and the mental health issues becoming an increasing emerging issues in our society, especially in Australian context, from what I know. And of course, the second reason is the technology and AI, automatic intelligence use at the workplace. That people started to realize we don't really need to work that longer hour to produce the same amount of the output. And in fact, some of the global technology companies already implemented 4 week days anyway. So they encourage their workers to go to the beach, to go hiking 1 day a week, because that will promote the creativity and innovations for the work. So that started already, I think about 10 years ago, discussions about this 4 weeks work already been discussed. And human beings just don't pick that up. I think if you talk about Henry Ford, where you implemented 5 days a week, he thought about it back in 1916, but he didn't implement it till 1926. So it takes a long time for people to think about that. But in fact, the discussions about this already started 10 or decades ago. And I think the third reason is really the shocks events made people think that more, like COVID definitely is a driving force behind these more discussions, and people started to realize there's probably benefit there for doing 4 days work weeks.
Well, Margaret, in Belgium's case, though, it seems that workers won't be working fewer hours, but they'll be working the same hours just in over 4 days. So there'll be sort of a higher concentration of work on each day. But in that case, won't some employees be under more pressure to complete tasks faster, which might compromise quality? Is having shorter but more concentrated work hours, has it actually proven to be more productive?
Yeah, that is indeed something that the experts warn about, is that they fear that if you spread the working hours over 5 days, you will allow employees also to relax during working hours, to have discussions with their colleagues, the water cooler discussions. And it is felt by experts that these types of conversations, they create a bond among employees, and they can also spark creativity. So there is that concern indeed, that if you push employees to compress their working hours onto 4 days instead of 5, that you will lose some of those benefits of that time to relax also during working time. At the same time, of course, it for some employees in certain positions, it can be quite artificial that they have to cut off their work day at 6 o'clock, because that is just the way that the company works. And so for some employees, it may be beneficial if they can spread their performance over a longer working day and then have that 5th day to do something else. And as my colleague mentioned, that in itself may also spark creativity if you have that 5th day to do something completely different, or potentially something that is also related to the work, but just not during working hours. So it really all depends on the position and how the employee also wants to fill that position.
Well, of course, the big idea behind the 4-day work week is promoting a better work-life balance. And Connie, well, how does an extra day of rest actually affect a person's well-being, and does it actually benefit productivity overall?
I believe it will, because as often believe, extra money or extra days of the work may buy more materials good outwardly. And I believe extra day of the rest will provide less materials but more soul food inside or inwardly for rest and for reflections, for restorations of the relationship, especially with the family, friends, and having a bit of fun, as earlier my colleagues mentioned, because having that sort of time away with the family, friends, in fact, have additional sort of sources of support will help you to be more human, I guess, in a sense. And research has time again showed that happy employees are more productive employees. So when an employee has less stress, they tend to think clearer and focus more, and also work more efficiently. And I believe that when relationship at home and relationship at work are restored and getting better, productivity increase as a flow-on effect naturally.
And Marga, beyond the individual employee corporate interest, how would society as a whole benefit from shorter work weeks? What kind of societal and environmental benefits might we see?
Well, in terms of environmental benefits, one of the effects that of course the government is hoping for is that this will have an impact on traffic jams. If of course employees are only required to come into work 4 days a week instead of 5, that in itself could already have a significant impact on traffic jams. But it also allows employees, the working population, to spread their activities that they usually have to do outside of the normal working hours, to do that on that 5th day that they don't have to work. And that could be the tedious tasks such as going to the commune to get your administrative paperwork in order, or things as doing your groceries. If these can be spread evenly across the week, it is expected that will also have some benefits. But of course, the main driver is the work-life balance, as it has been demonstrated by surveys that especially younger parents, for example, that they prefer, instead of, it was assumed that parents would prefer to leave work earlier in the day and spread that shorter workday over 5 days. But surveys demonstrate that, in fact, what employees prefer, if they're young parents, is to have 1 day off during the week where they can, for example, take care of their children full time. So this is something that is specifically designed for younger parents, but equally also for what is called the younger generation, where it is assumed that employees in their 20s are also looking for ways to do other things but work, and have that additional day off that they can spend on their hobbies, on their friends and their family.
Well, who doesn't want an extra day off work, eh? But like most good things, it does seem easier said than done. And while, Margaret, at this point, it seems 4-day work weeks seem available mostly for office workers, isn't it fair for people employed in other industries, though, who are forced to be physically present at work, like me and my colleagues here in the studio? Do you think these such workers should maybe get a pay rise? What other kind of mechanisms do you think could work out?
So in principle, in Belgium, the idea is that the 4-day work week would be open to all positions. If there is an agreement between employer and employee, it could work for any type of position. And it is expected that even, for example, blue-collar workers may also, through their unions, put some pressure to also have access to this regime. So as such, it would be open to all types of positions, provided, of course, that that type of position allows you to work for an extended period of time, and specifically where there's positions that require precision, for example, a cashier, it is expected that such longer working days are not an option. But as you say, it's very true that this 4-day work week is introduced as a measure in the war for talent. And for those employees where you cannot offer the 4-day working week, you'll have to be, or employers will have to be more creative to attract employees, and that could be in all types of benefits that you award, and ultimately, of course, just simple pay increases may also help, although I think these types of measures, purely financial, are usually not the way to encourage employees and to generate happiness at work.
And Connie, lastly, what should businesses do to succeed with a 4-day work week? What are some issues of concern that need to be addressed?
Right. I guess, things been discussed, as I said, 10 years ago already. So I guess business really need to prepare for these new things to come. So I think 3 things business probably need to prepare. I think, first of all, need to put employees' health and well-being in the centers of discussions about their business success and sustainability, because employees is the one there who can help the business and who can produce more and also service happy customers. And second thing is, I guess, everything we do, we do need some trials. So unless you try, you never know whether it works or not. So really, as earlier my colleagues mentioned, that these sort of 4 days work may not be for all business, but the majority of business can change this sort of working hours. So try it out and see how it works. It may work wonder for one business, but may not for the others. So you can adjust from that. Third things, I guess, it's very important to conduct research and check out what others, especially your competitors, doing. Seek for the best practice with reference to creative value proposition for the employees. And especially, I think everybody nowadays discuss there will be the great vaccinations out of this COVID. So employees started to feel that there are other things more important than work. So they will drop out of the work anyway. So why don't you, as a business or as an organization, start it first to think more innovative way and create this value proposition? So perhaps 4 days a week may be just one of the solution to keep and retain your employees.
Well, thank you for your time today, Margaret Caproni, partner at Squire Patton Boggs, and Connie Zheng, Associate Professor of Human Resource Management at the University of South Australia. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
In mid-March, K-pop group BTS will hold South Korea's largest in-person concert since the start of the pandemic. The Culture Ministry says BTS can perform in front of 15,000 fans a night during its 3 concerts in Seoul. So far, the largest number of spectators at a single performance during the pandemic was around 5,000. The BTS concerts take place on March 10th, 12th, and 13th in Seoul. All concert goers will be required to present a vaccine certificate or negative COVID-19 test result to enter. Safety management personnel will also be on site to enforce virus safety measures.
The BBC has included Tottenham Hotspur's Son Heung-min among its list of this week's best 11 in the Premier League. English football pundit Garth Crooks assembled his team with the South Korean as one of 3 forwards selected, along with his teammate Harry Kane and Liverpool's Mohamed Salah. Son notched 2 assists on Saturday, helping Spurs beat league leaders Manchester City 3-2. Crooks praised his first assist, calling it an example of textbook football. Kane and Son have now assisted one another for 36 league goals, tied for the most of any duo in EPL history, level with Chelsea's former pair Didier Drogba and Frank Lampard.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. According to an Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman on Monday, significant progress has been made in Vienna during talks to revive the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers. However, Iran's top security official noted that Iran and their European negotiators would continue talks without the United States, as they would not be the source of any breakthrough. Meanwhile, despite significant progress being made, Iran also noted that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, adding that the remaining issues are the hardest. Last week, Reuters reported that a U.S.-Iran deal was taking shape in Vienna after months of indirect talks to revive the nuclear pact. The draft text of the agreement alluded to issues such as unfreezing billions of dollars of Iranian funds in South Korean banks and the release of Western prisoners held in Iran. Iran's foreign ministry said Saturday that it would be ready to swap prisoners with the U.S., adding that talks to revive the nuclear deal could succeed at the earliest possible time if Washington made the necessary political decision. Italy's Mount Etna is active once again as a massive plume of ash rose into the sky over Sicily on Monday. The massive plume rose some 10 kilometers from the southeast crater of Europe's tallest and most active volcano, while spewing ash and large clouds of smoke into the sky over surrounding villages. The latest volcanic activity caused nearby Catania airport to be shut. The over 3,300-meter-high volcano showcases its power several times a year, spewing lava and ash high over the Mediterranean island, but rarely causes damage. Experts say the eruptions themselves do not put the local population at risk. One of the iconic stone monuments from the Easter Island, known as the Moai statue, began its journey back home on Monday, following a years-long campaign to get it returned to its original setting on the island after being showcased in a museum in Santiago since the 19th century. The 715-kilogram sculpture will be transported by truck to the Chilean port city, Valparaiso, from where it will then be placed on a naval ship for 5 days to reach the remote Easter Island, known locally as Rapa Nui. The move is part of a repatriation program seeking to return ancestral remains and sacred and funerary objects to the Pacific Ocean island. Similar negotiations have taken place to recover other artifacts in the hands of British museums. Easter Island, which is located some 3,200 kilometers from the coast of Chile, has over 1,000 stone statues that were carved centuries ago by the island's inhabitants, bringing it fame and UNESCO World Heritage Site status. With the 2022 Beijing Winter Games coming to a close, the Olympic flag landed at Milan's Malpensa Airport on Monday, with Italy now set to host the Games for the second time, 20 years after Torino 2006. The Olympic flags were waved by the mayors of Milan and Cortina, the two host cities of the 2026 Winter Games, followed by Italian athletes, including Arianna Fontana. The Milan-Cortina Games will be a two-center games, with ice sports taking place in Milan and alpine activities in the mountains of Cortina. With COVID-19 impacting both the 2020 Tokyo Summer Games and the 2022 Beijing Winter Games, organizers and fans alike hope the 2026 Milan-Cortina Winter Games will be the first Winter Games hosted COVID-free. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning. Bundle up on your way out, biting cold conditions to start the day. It feels like temperatures are below -10 degrees Celsius here in the capital, and cold wave alerts are still in place across the central parts of the country. The West Coast and Jeju Island will receive another round of snowfall from late this afternoon into tomorrow at dawn, while the rest of the country will be under sunny skies with drier air. I mean, we've already had 2 spring seasonal terms, but it still feels like we're going through midwinter. Even Busan is starting out the day at about -1 degree Celsius. Highs will be 2 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday. Seoul going up to the freezing mark. Daegu topping out at 4 degrees this afternoon. Now expect the last cool days of winter through Thursday. Then things will feel more like early spring from Friday. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. We'll be back at 8 a.m. Korea time on Wednesday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Kim Mo-kyeon.
And I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.
Everyone knows I'm passionate. Know why? Look at how passionate Koreans are. And you know I'm fast. Don't blink. Koreans move fast too. I'm creative on the pitch. People say I'm smart. Just look how smart Korea is. I aim to be spectacular for the fans. Why am I so fun? Is it because Korea is